Magnate. Corner the market and dominate the reach with your commercial prowess.
Hello. It is an ARCS video. This is actually the third one, if I end up releasing them in order, but the first one that we are recording. So that might be weird. It's a video about ARCS, campaign ARCS specifically. If you don't know how to play campaign ARCS, there are videos out there for you to learn. And then you can come back and watch this and enjoy yourself as we talk about the Magnate. I'm Cole.
Magnate.
That was Perry.
I'm Perry.
I'm Jamie. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
I'm Christian.
And we are the ARCS gang. That's what we call ourselves now.
We don't call ourselves that.
Oh. What should we call ourselves?
We do now.
I don't know. Never mind yet, sure.
The ARCS Battalion.
The ARCS brothers.
ARCS Brothers is good.
Like Marx Brothers, but ARCS.
Yes.
Oh.
What do the Marx Brothers do again?
Like slapstick comedy.
Right. Who are the
I thought it was
planes?
that guy who was the communist.
Not one of the brothers, different Marx.
Not
Yeah.
Karl Marx.
That's
no.
Karl Marx.
Groucho
Brother.
Marx is a guy with a mustache.
I mean-
And you know who would like Karl Marx? The Magnate.
Thank you for that.
What is?
It's a good.
Yes.
Why?
Well, it's simple. Karl Marx is a noted communist,
Uh-huh.
and the Magnate wears a space monocle and is a noted capitalist. So he would probably like to do research on Karl Marx and would relish the opportunity to speak with him as somebody who shares a passion for a similar subject but from the
Okay.
opposite viewpoint.
Right.
Because of the monocle, mostly.
Mostly because of the monocle, yeah. You think that little guy down there is Karl Marx on the card?
No, I don't.
Oh.
Karl Marx, he had like a big bushy beard and
Well,
hair,
this is like
right?
space.
Space
Like he
Karl
went to
Marx?
space and, you know, they
Space
Karl
preserved
Marx.
his body in the thing.
Space Karl Marx is going to be one of the DLC fates. One of the new A fates.
I actually talked to Cole Willie about that last
Yeah.
week. He
That'd
said,
be awesome.
all right, so we're going to talk about the Magnate now. The way this is going to kind of work is we're just going to go through each act. Obviously for the A fates, there are 3 acts, starting from Act 1. And then we're going to talk about, you know, the objective, what kind of cards and abilities they're going to get from act to act, what we think a general strategy might look like for that act, of course considering, you know, the downstream repercussions going into the later acts, notable cards that you might want to look out for in each act, notable matchups, and pivots that you can make going to the next act. If you're the type of player who only wants to experience the fates as you play them and doesn't want to hear about ones you haven't played yet, we are going to, you know, denote each section. So if we're talking about the matchups in like Act 3 or something, and you don't want to hear about certain, I don't know, C fates that you might not have seen before, totally fine. Just, you know, I'll do timestamps, you can skip it. Pivots, same thing. It's not like we're going to like, you know, catch you off guard with anything.
Man, now that you've said that, if you don't feel like adding timestamps, all the viewers are going to think you're a jerk.
No, I'm going to add the timestamps.
Okay.
Okay, so we enter Act 1 with the Magnate. Jamie,
Act 1.
you are holding the objective card.
I am.
Would you like to read it?
Oh, not particularly, but I will. I will. All right. So you have 10 objective points to tick down. The first way is to close deals with rivals, which in summit negotiations advance 2 each time a rival gives you a favor or resource, except one that you gave them during this summit. And export to the galactic core. In summit negotiations, advance 2 each time you choose to discard 3 resources. You can fulfill both objectives multiple times in one summit. Summits happen from event cards in the Imperial Council, and you can't discard resources from your Merchant League. They're frozen except for the transfer asset action.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about Merchant League.
Yeah.
I think that's the defining characteristic of the Magnate.
Very cool card. Yeah. So the Merchant League is your protected fuel type guild card. You probably can't see the fuel logo from here. And this card says that when you declare an ambition, you may gain any 2 resources onto Merchant League. And these resources are frozen except for the transfer asset action in summits, which then helps you advance your Act 1 objective. Additionally, in a crisis, you must discard all resources from Merchant League. So there's a bit of a risk-reward factor going into play. So yeah, that's all you get. You get Merchant League and good luck. So as far as Merchant League goes, what do we think about this card?
Come on. I'm not kidding. I think Merchant League might be the best guild card that you get for starting a Fate in the game.
Deal makers.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Second up, I do agree. Like, I think it's
very strong. I do think Deal Makers is better.
Deal Makers might be better. I haven't played the Steward yet. But it can't be stolen, has no raid cost, and you get to keep it even if you fail throughout anything, and obviously you keep it if you succeed. And then anytime you declare a summit, being able to take 2 resources that you can then trade in the summits if you want to is huge. Like, it makes it so much easier to win ambitions. And then, at least in the first part, when you're trying to do those trades, you can tick down your objective marker, like having extra resources to play with that you don't have to tax for when other people are probably hurting for resources in the beginning of the game. Absolutely huge. Love Merchant League.
Yeah. And, also remember that you don't have to declare an ambition with the lead card to trigger Merchant League. You can use Populist Demands. You can use other effects like the Steward's Lesser Regent card that they add, the Advocate's Liaison cards that they add to get extra triggers of Merchant League. So be on the lookout for stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Merchant League, very good card. And I guess we'll move on to the general strategy now. What do you guys think in terms of Act 1? I don't think this is a particularly difficult Act 1.
See, I don't know if I agree with that. I know we've talked about this off camera briefly, but the fact that in order to score your objective points the primary way, you need to get people to trade with you.
Yeah.
Is kind of tough if people don't want the Act 2 or Act 3 Magnate in the game.
Sure. However, I would like to posit that it shouldn't be very difficult to make trades if you're willing to make trades that are a little bit beneficial for the other player over you. And those trades are for the ambition that you just declared with Merchant League. So, for example, I declare Empath and I gain 2 psionics on a Merchant League. The next time we go into a summit, I say, okay, most likely at least one of you guys needs to win Empath here because you have to advance your objective by winning ambitions. So who wants the psionics? And then it shouldn't be that hard to trade them, I don't think.
I definitely think it'll be more effective in a game where you're with other fates that need to win ambitions to take down their objective markers.
Which are like pretty much all of them.
But for the ones that don't, I feel like at least the 3 of us when we play tend not to care too much about winning ambitions in the first act.
Well, the only ones that don't need to win ambitions, like ever, actually there aren't any. They all care about ambition progress besides the Magnate to some extent. The Steward needs to win ambitions as the first regent. The Founder needs to win ambitions as an outlaw. The Advocate needs to be in scoring position to use all of their guild cards. The Caretaker advances for winning ambitions while they hold golems. The Partisan advances for winning ambitions where they don't have corresponding outrage. The Admiral advances when they're winning an ambition and Imperial ships are placed. And the Believer has to win ambitions as well to advance their objective. So that's like pretty much everybody.
That's a good point.
So I don't think you're gonna have that hard of a time. If people like really want to be like, I don't want to trade, like then it's like kind of annoying.
Yeah.
But I think
And at least you get Merchant League if you don't succeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nice. I like Merchant League because when edicts are called, you can have a little extra to give the first regent. That was what I primarily had. I swear, everything got tossed off of Merchant League right away.
Is that allowed?
What do you mean?
If
they're protected, I thought.
They are frozen
They're frozen?
resources. I don't think they can be taken by...
Am I just
They're
remembering
frozen
incorrectly?
except for transfer asset action, and summits.
Am I crazy?
I don't know if it works like that.
I think
actually.
you're crazy.
You might be crazy.
In the game, don't do that.
Sorry, everybody.
Yeah. They're frozen except for transfer asset. That's weird because like you can force transfer asset with favor, but they don't have a raid cost.
In the errata on I don't know where the errata on that website comes from that has all the cards in the deck. It does say they have a raid cost of 1, I think.
Okay. So that makes it a little bit worse, the Merchant League, but like
Yeah.
it's still very good. So in terms of the general strategy, like I said, I do think it's good to try and like sell ambitions, like I just discussed.
Yeah.
You know, if you can get favors for these, that's really good because that's going to really help in Act 2 with getting monopolies, because you can use those to gain resources they need for monopolies.
Another thing about the favor is, if I'm reading everything correctly, I'm pretty sure that when you call a summit, you could spend a favor to get another player to give you a favor, which would proc another -2 on your objective.
Or a resource, right?
Or a resource, but then you'd have to pay for the resource cost, whatever.
Right,
but
right.
if you get the favor back and then you call another summit, you can do it again.
I'm 90% sure even getting your own favor back as part of a trade counts as well because it is still a favor even though it's yours. You're not like gaining it onto the card, but you are getting the favor in the trade.
Right.
And I think that still counts. I'm like 99% sure that should still count.
Yeah, so favor trades I think are really, really good.
Yeah.
If you can pull those off.
Yeah.
And on top of getting favor, I think, especially if there's no steward or admiral in the game, trying to secure the first regency as often as possible is really good for the Magnate, because then you can get those early favors that you can use to succeed on your objectives.
Also just helps you call summits.
Yep.
That's true.
Yeah, I think the first regency is going to be very important when we talk about Act 2. And we'll get to that when we talk about the matchup section in Act 1, but I do think if the steward is in the game, you're probably going to want to try and not help them at all, because the steward is going to still want to be the first regent when Act 2 rolls around. And as we just discussed, first regent's very good for you. It's good for everyone, but it's particularly good for the Magnate, I think. And then on the topic of trying to advance your objective by selling ambitions, another thing that I think you should do is offer an incentive to the player who has the chance to call said summit. So going back to the empath example, hey, Perry, I see you have the initiative. You can call a summit right now. You need to win an ambition. Normally, I would only do like a trade of like one of these psionics for like your weapon or something. But if you call the summit, I'll give you both.
Yeah.
Something like that. And then they call the summit. They get a good trade, and you advance your objective. And you don't have to use export to the galactic core, which I think should really be
Last resort.
last resort, and maybe even don't even bother, because if you don't have enough resources going into Act 2, you should probably just switch anyway. But again, we'll cover that when we get to it. I think the second goal you should have, besides completing your objective, is having at least 3 cities out on the map by the end of Act 1, so that you have access to all 6 of your resource slots.
That makes sense.
Which is a pretty big deal. Because if you only have 4, which is how much you have with 2 cities, it's going to be very difficult, again, in Act 2, to get your monopolies. A lot of Magnate Act 1, I think, needs to be set up for Act 2 because of how difficult your Act 2 objective is.
That being said, though, I know you want to have those resource slots available to you, but you will still have Merchant League. So if you declare 1 ambition and get 2 resources on Merchant League, you only need 1 other resource to have the majority of that type.
But if edicts are called and you can get 2 monopolies...
Sure, I get it. But if you have 3 cities on the board and you're trying to fill up all those resource slots in order to take the monopolies, that may pin a target on your back that you don't necessarily need.
Consider it also gets you access to the more difficult to raid resource slots. For example, you have 2 resources on Merchant League, and in each of the 3 key slots. Who really wants to raid that,
That's true.
So it's not even necessarily just filling up all 6, though you might want to do that at certain points. It also just protects them better, because otherwise you're going to have to put stuff in the 1 key slots.
The 3 key bonus is something I had not considered. That is definitely a strong boon for keeping your resources.
Also, just stick to your word in general. Like, if you say you're going to make a trade with someone, don't lie. I mean, that's pretty important, like, as far as the game goes in general, but definitely for the Magnate, because
in Act 1, maybe.
Because people want to trade with you. Yeah. If breaking your word wins you the game, go ahead. It's not going to happen in Act 1. I would say try to keep your word so people will continue to want to trade with you. And as far as, the monopolies go, we're going to cover them in a bit, but you have to have the majority of certain types of resources in order to gain their corresponding monopolies. I would say try to have that monopoly on 1 resource type by the end of the act as like a tertiary goal, because that will set you up really nicely for Act 2.
Yeah, with the monopolies, well, I guess we should talk about the Act 2 goals now, right? I mean, we're talking so much about them.
Yeah, we can
already.
preview them. We still have to go through the cards and matchups for Act 1.
Oh, yeah. I guess, so at this point, we should probably talk about those. Then.
Sure.
We're talking about the end of Act 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll do notable cards to look out for while you're playing through Act 1. I've put together a small list if you guys would like to listen to these. Populist Demands, we already talked about, very important for triggering Merchant League, very good. Song of Freedom, in Chapter 1, if everyone's tied for power, which they will be because it's Chapter 1, you don't want to have the initiative because losing cities is very bad for you. As we just discussed, you want to try to have 3 of them out. If you're like already entrenched in a place and then you have your starport and your city in the same system and then they replace your city with a free city, it's like, oh gosh, now I have to go to a whole new system just to get that same city back. It's a real pain. So avoid having the initiative. If you have to have the initiative, try and secure Song of Freedom as quickly as you can.
Only in Chapter 1
Yeah.
when it's tied, though. Or if you're leading the rest of the
I don't
chapters.
think the Magnate's going to be leading for the rest of the chapters because everyone else has to win ambitions, and I think it's probably
Right.
to your benefit to try and lag behind just a tiny bit. Score doesn't matter too much in Act 1 anyway.
Especially because, I know we'll get to this later, but the Magnate's scoring potential is so high in Acts 2 and 3 with all those resources.
Yeah, 100%. Additionally, shipping and mining interest are going to be really, really helpful for getting monopolies. Try and get at least one of them. If you can get both, that's great. Don't use them in Act 1. Keep them for Act 2. Elder Broker is, not as useful, but it still helps you gain resources, so keep an eye out for that. The trade action lets you, swap resources to potentially get a monopoly that someone else was going to get, but you're probably going to be discarding it for the material and fuel.
Yeah,
That's-
I don't know if we need to be watching out for Elder Broker.
Well, I said to a parentheses much lesser extent, but it's a card that helps you get resources. Obviously, if you can get it at little to no
Sure.
effort, just do it. Sworn Guardians will protect your resources and interest guild cards from Silver Tongues and other stealing effects. That's always going to be good. And then as far as lore that can show up, you're going to want to definitely look out for living structures, which allows you to change your cities back into starports, but more importantly, your starports into cities, and also use the build action to tax, which gives you twice as many cards that let you tax.
Yeah, that's huge.
Ancient Holdings gives you an extra resource slot that has 4 keys. Definitely very good for protecting your resources. Gate Stations allows you to place a city in a gate, and then that resource, you can tax it for all 3 types of cities that are present. If there isn't a city built in that system, you don't get to tax for that type. But, it's still good. And then Cloud Cities helps you build an extra city in a system, so you can really stack up in if you really want to consolidate into one system. Not ideal because it's the same resource type, but if you really need to get that 3rd city out to unlock those slots, Cloud Cities can help you do that.
Yeah, sure, some of those lore cards are good, but also lore cards are way less likely to show up.
Mm-hmm.
As for the guild cards, I want to double down on how really, really good mining interest and fuel interest are for the Magnate. Incomparable to anything else. In preparing for Act 2, and even just in Act 1, when building gets you those fuel and cubes consistently, because that's 2 different monopolies you could have basically just from having those guild cards.
Yeah. Very, very good. They can help you get 2 monopolies in the same edict because you can secure something and then, gain onto Merchant League a different resource, and then use that to get all 5 of the material or all 5 of the fuel, and then have 2 monopolies. As far as matchups, I already talked about the Steward. I do think the Steward is going to be annoying. They're frequently going to be collecting Imperial Demand from you. In Act 1, you probably just want to ride it out, pony up, and try and make them fail in the end. It would be ideal to make them fail. Steward is very powerful, so I do think the other fates might be inclined to try and help you do that because just Deal Makers is such a powerful ability, as we are quite familiar with.
Yes.
For the Founder, I think you like the Founder and you want the Founder to succeed because the Commonwealth existing makes it easier for you to tax resources because you can tax free cities that aren't Empire controlled. And it makes it more difficult to raid you or destroy your cities if the armistice is called. And you might be the player with the lowest power that can then call that armistice and protect yourself, which I think is good.
Yeah, for sure.
I would say particularly pay attention to the Believer and the Admiral if they're in your Act 1 because they have very difficult objectives and they're probably going to need a little bit of extra help that you might be able to give them towards winning their ambitions. So you might be able to make a bit more favorable trades for yourself that don't really just seem like you're just fishing to complete your objective. And, they're still going to get something out of it. The Admiral is going to want fuel and weapons, so if they're in the game, pay attention to that. The Believer is going to probably want relics and psionics. So if they're in the game, prioritize those.
See, I don't know if helping the Admiral succeed should really be high up on the list of the Magnate's priorities. I feel like they do not want the Admiral in the later stages of the game.
Just because of the martial law in Act 3?
Well, I mean...
I think the Magnate wants a strong empire.
Okay, but with the Admiral in the game, the Empire is strong and can also kick the Magnate down too.
Well, no. You're talking about like rogue admirals?
Yeah, the cards that let the Admiral basically do whatever he wants.
Well, the rogue admirals doesn't actually allow you to attack a region with Imperial ships.
You can still tax
their cities.
Yeah.
That's okay. You wouldn't prefer it. You can also secure rogue admirals, to be clear, which is going to be pretty beneficial to you for taxing more resources.
But then also, if the Admiral wants to be first region, which they often do, then that's another fate that wants to lay claim to it the Magnate has to compete with.
Yeah, I think you can give them resources without overtly helping them win. They're gonna really want them. Is really my point.
Yes. And so if you need to trade with them,
they're gonna be easy trading.
It will not be difficult.
The Caretaker has an extra ability to trigger crises with the Stone Speaker's card, which they can use to wake up all their golems. You don't like that. Probably want the Caretaker to fail.
No one likes the Caretaker.
If we're prioritizing which face we want to fail, I would say Steward first. Caretaker is probably second. They also add an extra event card which can trigger more crises in Act 2.
And they can clog up your resource slots if they give you the
Ooh,
face time.
that's very big too. Yeah. Okay, so we definitely don't like the Caretaker or the Steward. We hate them. We don't want them to be in the game. The Advocate is going to want your fuel and relics, but I don't think they're going to have as much of a hard time completing their objective. There's not that much noble about them, but do keep an eye on opportunities to enable them to use that Guild Investigator's card because they're prevented from using it if they're not in scoring position from one of the ambitions. So, you can use that as a wedge to drive your sales. So that's matchups. Pivots. What do you guys think a good B fate looks like for someone who's just finished playing Magnate following the guidelines we just outlined?
Well, I won my game after pivoting from a Magnate. I would like to say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how good the pivot was, but I pivoted to Hegemon, and it worked out nicely, I would say.
I think Merchant League in general is just going to be very good for winning ambitions. So there's not really going to be a bad pivot. But in terms of particularly synergistic pivots, there's two that I picked out that I think are good. Number one is the Warden, because you're going to have a lot of cities on the board, most likely. And then more cities means you get to, establish your fiefs, which is going to be very useful. Secondarily, also the Pirate, kind of, because your cities turn into free cities that you can raid, but that's not nearly as compelling as the Warden. And then also the Peacekeeper. Merchant League is going to make it really easy for you to get weapons and put them on Arsenal Keepers. Going to make that objective really easy, and probably, make it trivial to finish your Act 2, and you can spend a lot of time just getting points and beating up other people. Additionally, though, if you failed, you're not going to get that. Wait, does the Magnate does still add the monopolies? Yeah, so the Magnate adds the monopolies if they succeed.
Nope.
No.
Of the
In Act 1 going to Act 2, you only add the monopolies in your setup.
Yeah, it's the
setup.
Really? Only if you decide to pivot to that.
Yeah.
Keep staying the same.
If they fail, though, the cartels are all added.
Yeah, that was the other thing I was going to say. If you fail, you do have to keep an eye out for the weapon cartel. Okay, I thought they added the monopolies between. That's kind of a bummer. Obviously, having the weapon monopoly with Peacekeeper and Merchant League would be great. You can't do that.
Could have the weapon cartel, though.
Yeah. You don't really need it, though. Merchant League's going to be good enough for
So good.
easily stockpiling those weapons and making them hard to get. And I think that's Act 1, unless anyone has any other B-Fates they wanted to discuss.
Not
B-Fates are not my forte.
Yeah, Perry doesn't like to play B-Fates.
I don't know if we mentioned the cards that you get if you succeed added to the court deck. If we want to quickly go through those.
Yeah, we can.
It's Elder Broker, which, like we said before, nobody cares about. Relic Fence, which is actually pretty interesting, I think. Relic Fence lets you,
Could be useful.
get the relics. And then Prison Wardens, I was thinking about this would be really good for the Magnate because they want to be taxing resources. So if they're able to control somebody else's cities and tax for a resource and a captive, they can then use those captives to get more resources.
Yeah.
So if you succeed Magnate going into Act 2, I think Prison Wardens would be a huge pickup.
Yeah, I think it's going to be kind of situational that you're actually able to do that taxing, but if you're able to do it, I would definitely go for it.
Even like once or twice,
Yeah.
that'd be good.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of like resource types to prioritize in Act 1, I'm going to say that you want Relics and Psionics. Everyone wants Relics and Psionics. There's a particular reason I think the Magnate wants Relics and Psionics in Act 2, so if you have the opportunity to get access to those, I would take it, in setup and when you're expanding.
Are you about to talk more about that as we go on to Act 2?
It's Act 2 now.
Okay.
Did you take out the cards? The ones, the red ones?
Yeah. I didn't really think they were that
resolution.
important. Do you want me to go grab them?
No, it's all right. I'm good.
No, I'll go grab them.
What cards?
The resolution.
The resolution, the
resolution
red
is like the
ones.
end of the-
If you fail or if you succeed, what you get.
Oh.
I was like, I know. I'm like, I feel like they've got to be somewhere. Thank
There.
you.
Okay.
3.
So, Magnate Act 2. Christian,
Magnate Act 2.
would you like to illuminate
Oh,
the
yes.
Magnate Act 2?
Please.
Dude, I would love nothing more. So you start with 12 points, no matter the player count. You advance 1 each time you gain a Monopoly card from the supply, which we're going to talk about a lot, I'm sure. And then at the end of a chapter, you advance 1 for each Monopoly card that you have.
Right.
Pretty simple.
Yeah. Pretty simple, but really difficult. I think Magnate Act 2 is one of the hardest single act objectives in the game. I think 12 points is honestly kind of unreasonable. Like 10, I think
do
would
think
be
it's
more.
too high.
I think 10 might be more doable. 12 is kind of insane. And the reason for that is, you only have the 3 chapters and you need to tick down 12 times. So like if you don't get at least 2 monopolies in the first chapter and then tick down twice for gaining them and twice for holding them in that first chapter, like you're kind of cooked. And then you need to continue gaining them as well because just holding those 2 is not going to be enough.
Yeah, I think getting them early is really important. But also, I think that flipping back and forth who has them is actually better than it might seem for the Magnate at first, because when you get into Act 3, if you don't have as many in the beginning of the act, then when you eventually have to scrap them to score, they'll be more available at the end.
I think that is like an attractive proposition, but it's so hard to get the monopolies that I really don't think the Magnate can afford to risk like giving them away.
No, I understand that. I think that especially in the first couple turns of Act 2, you need to do everything you can to secure.
Yeah. Like we're like talking like popping your shipping interest right away as soon as, the edicts have a chance to come up. And speaking of edicts coming up, let's just talk about how the monopolies are acquired in the first place.
Yeah.
So monopolies in general, these are going to be the hugely impactful mechanic for your Act 2. They're going to make scoring Tycoon, Keeper, and Empath way easier for whoever holds them because the supply for the corresponding resource is kept on the Monopoly card and counted for your ambitions.
It makes scoring Warlord easier too because of
Right.
war profiteering.
Yeah, we'll get to that as well. It's like a cartel card that can't be raided from you. It just doesn't have like the guild count, but you don't really need it because the resource supply is going to be kept there. And then it has a few other advantages as well. You gain them by having the majority of a resource type when edicts are resolved. You add a new edict called Gain Monopolies. For each resource type, a player takes the Monopoly card of its type if they have more than half of the total resources of its type in play. Okay. And then additionally, the Monopoly Consent Summit action is added. In summits, players may only give a resource with transfer asset if they have the consent of the player with the monopoly for that resource. Consent is not needed if no one has the monopoly. So this is pretty important for your ability to just hold on to the monopolies. Otherwise, players could kind of just like try and play around it and collaborate against you, but you can just say no, unless they have your favors, in which case, that's a bummer. That's probably why you don't want to give out favors in Act 1 if you can help it as well.
Yeah.
And then finally, you add war profiteering, which is a new law, which says in Act 2 and 3 setup, you place the war profiteer marker on the warlord ambition box, and the warlord ambition now counts the total of trophies and weapons icons from resources and cards. So the weapon monopoly now counts for scoring as well, if there are resources on it. Christian doesn't like that.
I love war profiteering because
wow, bold claim.
It's so annoying when your ships get locked up in somebody else's warlord box and you have to declare it so they can score. If you've got a bunch of weapons, now you can score warlord and get your ships back.
I don't like it because it just adds another objective that I think the Magnate auto wins if they happen to have the monopoly type. Not necessarily that, they auto win it, but they get a lot of points towards it just from having the weapon monopoly.
We're talking about the Magnate today, man. From the Magnate's perspective, what a great thing to put on the board.
Yeah, sorry, from everyone else's perspective, though, they do not want you to have any monopolies.
Yeah.
They might have been fine with letting you have the weapon one because it doesn't score anything, but now it scores, so.
Oh, yeah, it does.
The monopolies are good, obviously. There is counterplay. You can still tax the resources if they're on the monopoly, so the monopoly isn't automatically worth 5 progress towards whatever objective it corresponds to. It can be worth as few as 0 if there's nothing in the supply, of course. So, there is that to consider. It's not just like an auto-win thing, though it does help out a lot, because every time someone spends a resource, it's going to you. So let's talk Act 2 strategy. What are we doing here?
I mean, like we said before, at the end of Act 1, you should be prepared to seize, hopefully, at least 2 monopolies right away. Because even if you get, 2 and then keep them the entire time, that is only 8 points towards your objective of 12.
Yeah.
So you would have to either get 3 in the first chapter to get 3 then, and then 3 each turn for all 12, or 2 in the first one, and then 2 more in the next one in order to be completing that,
right.
Which is hard.
Yeah, and I think, because of the strict timing of all this, there's one really important piece of your Act 2 strategy that you need to take advantage of, because there's no way to know when someone else is going to play an event card, and then it's a 50% chance to roll edicts. You simply can't rely on them. You have to secure the Imperial Council and call edicts yourself.
Yeah.
This is why you want the psionics and relics. Because a particularly good strategy, and this is not my own strategy, this is from the brain of Chaotic Noodle, who wrote the Void Chronicler's Guide to the Magnate, which I did a bit of the editing and suggesting on, but otherwise not really affiliated with. And this, obviously, video is not affiliated with them at all, but they do some really cool guides that you can check out on Board Game Geek. I'll link that in the description. But his proposal is that when the Imperial Council is on its purple side, the decided side that you can't influence or secure, hopefully because you were the one who already secured it, what you can do is play an event card and seize the initiative, right? And then call the summit with said initiative in order to flip the council. Then you have initiative, you're the first person to go, and you go from there. You relic and psionic onto the thing to secure it, provided you have a influence card that you can lead with to copy influence with psionic, and then you declare as well with Merchant League with your lead card to gain 2 resources, and then you call edicts, profit, gain your monopolies. I think that's pretty important, and so for Magnate, you're definitely going to be wanting to be looking out for those event cards, even though you don't want to rely on them rolling edicts. They're still quite strong for you. And then on the topic of event cards, obviously there's a 50% chance they roll crises and discard the resources on your Merchant League.
But if you do that early in the first chapter of Act 2, then there's not going to be anything in Merchant League anyway, right? Those resources get cleared between acts.
Yeah, they can clear between acts.
Yeah, so if you do it right away and play your event card and do your whole
Yeah.
edict thing, then you would have
Well,
no real risk with that.
that the particular strength of the event card is that the council's on the purple side.
Right.
If it's not on the purple side, you can seize with any old thing and do it. If it's, got no agents on it, you can still do that. So this does probably come up later, and you might already have stuff on Merchant League. But in my opinion, I don't think it's worth ever trying to trade the resources on Merchant League if you are working towards a monopoly with them. Even if you're not, you might use them for monopoly later. I feel like you just always take the coin flip that they stay on the card and don't get discarded. Unless someone's offering you like a really good deal, you need resources. I feel like you just got to take the chance.
I mean, you could always trade resources for other resources. I don't think saying don't trade Merchant League if there is maybe about to be a crisis roll is necessarily good advice.
What I'm saying is it has to be a good trade. Like if someone's offering you your two resources on Merchant League for one resource, that's not a good trade.
Yeah, no, don't let them extort you. But if they're offering like a fine trade, like, hey, can I have the crate on your Merchant League for the rocket on my board? Like that seems fine if you're about to resolve an event.
I feel like though people don't want to trade with the Magnate in Act 2 because the monopolies exist, and if the Magnate gets the monopolies, it makes them harder to trade with everyone else. And so they're really gonna be the only deals they're gonna accept or should accept with resources from Merchant League are ones that are gonna be very good for them. And because of that, I don't think you're gonna want to make those trades.
When you trade with stuff on Merchant League, do you get to put new stuff on there, or is that only it has to go on your board? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the other thing is you lose resource slots by trading off Merchant League.
Yeah, that would be my main issue with it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's 2 unrateable resource slots, or 4, if you happen to stack double.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think having more than 4 is going to come up very frequently, just because of the frequency of event cards and frequency at which you can declare ambitions. But, it's not, you can still consider trading. I just don't think it's, particularly good to do.
Right. Yeah, I didn't think about the resource slot problem. That is definitely a good point.
Yeah. Obviously, if you were able to secure mining or shipping interests, you're going to want to use them after spending your other resources to gain as much material and fuel as possible. So in the example we just discussed, say you have the mining interest, you use, and say you have 1 weapon in your resources and the relic and psionic. You do that whole sequence we just discussed. After you spend your relic and psionic to secure the council, you then discard mining interest to gain material. And when you declared, you gain 2 weapons on the Merchant League. Now you have the weapon monopoly and the material monopoly. You get to resolve edicts and get 2 monopolies right away.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Absolutely huge.
I would say continue selling ambitions, because there are still people that need to win ambitions in Act 2, and just points are going to become more relevant as we move forward. Just keep trying to do that to gain more monopolies. People are going to be more hesitant to trade with you because they don't want you to gain the monopolies, but just try and push for it when you can. There's no reason not to. For example, trading fuel for weapons when Tycoon is declared and worth the most points. You can try it. Obviously, hold on to your monopolies at all costs using that monopoly consent rule at summits. I don't think there's any reason to ever give consent for people to trade resources that would lose you a monopoly. But in general, I guess if it's a trade that doesn't hurt you at all, don't enforce it, because then people are going to get really resentful of the monopoly thing in general.
Right.
But definitely don't just give away the monopolies. And we got to emphasize again, you really don't have any margin for error here. You have to gain as many monopolies as you can as quickly as possible in order to complete this objective.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
I'm familiar, yeah.
I like Magnate Act 2. I think it's a fun Act 2. I think it's more fun than Act 1. And I think some of the fun of Act 1 is trying to prepare for Act 2 because of how difficult it is. So we can talk about notable cards now. I think all the cards that we mentioned in the Act 1 section are still going to be relevant to varying degrees. Additionally, Galactic Bards can be added to the deck by some fates. You're going to want to look out for this one.
Love Galactic Bards.
Yeah. Great card. Obviously, it only has the 1 key raid cost, so people are going to want to try and steal it from you because it's pretty easy to steal. But if you can get it, you can use it to declare when you're not leading in order to gain more resources onto Merchant League, which is pretty huge. Additionally, Secret Order, I believe that's added by Believer if they fail. That lets you declare, when you declare Keeper or Empath, you don't place a 0 marker.
Don't place a 0 marker, right.
So you can use that to declare, for example, Keeper, and then gain whatever stuff you want, and then hopefully retain the initiative and declare something again on your next turn to gain even more resources on a Merchant League. The Liaison cards, which are added by Advocate, give you ways to get their corresponding resource by copying. So that's another way to gain resources. But they also let you, by attaching them to a card in the court deck, declare their corresponding ambition, which is another way to get resources on Merchant League.
I was going to add, too, though, that basically any card that has something that allows you to gain resources is going to be good for the Magnate.
Right.
Yeah.
I do... There are a few of them. I didn't list those specifically because I do think the declaring cards are like particularly powerful, and you should look out for those because of Merchant League being so strong. Yeah, anything that gets you resources, obviously you want it, and you don't want other people to have it,
right?
Particularly because they can get the monopolies as well. The Magnate, I don't know if we made this clear, is not the only person who can have the monopolies. Anyone can get the monopolies and use them for their own benefit. Outrage Spreads is a card that can be added. If the Partisan fails, you need to secure this card as soon as it shows up. If someone uses it to declare outrage of a type that you're working towards a monopoly for, that can just completely torpedo your Act 2 on the spot. You got to get that card right away. And use it on a resource that you don't currently have any of, if possible. Or I think you can just choose not to resolve it, which is another potential consideration. But the point is you want to be the one deciding what to do with that card, so just secure it. And there's a crisis effect, which I don't even know what it is because it's never come up in our campaign, but you definitely don't want it. So just secure it as soon as you can. Get that card out of the court.
Is the outrage effect, or is the crisis effect the one that has something to do with planets that...
That's the terror strike.
Right.
Planets that match your outrage type. I think it has something to do with I think it's you trigger outrage of the type that matches the dice roll. So if the dice roll was 5
like a planet
chevron, and then you look at the planet type and then everyone triggers outrage of that type, it's nasty. Or it might be one specific player. I don't know. Anyway, it's outrage is bad. You don't want it. Okay, so that moves us on to matchups. The Steward, I think, is the big matchup for Act 2 that you want to look out for. If you weren't able to cause the Steward to fail in Act 1, you're going to be in for a rough ride in Act 2 because you're going to have a lot more difficulty securing the Imperial Council in this matchup, which you definitely need to do to secure edicts. If you do manage to secure it, the Steward is going to fight to take it back, and it's going to be difficult to get it in the first place because Steward does have deal makers. So, it's going to be a very tricky a fight with them. You're probably going to have to leave a lot of the time spent being First Regent to the Steward because they're going to be able to secure it with much more ease than you with deal makers, and then you're just going to have to pony up and pay the Imperial demand, which again sucks, really works against your ability to get those monopolies. But it's likely your only way forward. I don't think becoming an outlaw is good. You want a strong empire to have those Imperial ships protecting your cities. You're going to have a lot of cities that are not going to be defended very well except for those Imperial ships. And then when we get to Act 3, you're going to want to prefer the economy status that shows up when you're a regent as to outlaw, in my opinion. But we'll discuss that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Founder, again, Commonwealth, making it easier for everyone to tax resources and more difficult for rivals to raid you. That's great. Partisan seizing can be added by the Act 2 partisan. That makes raiding at cities, especially in order to ransack the court, much more attractive to people. They're probably going to seize on resource types by declaring outrage on them, and then they don't have as many reservations about destroying your cities because they already have that outrage type.
Yeah, did we talk about the partisan matchup earlier? If the partisan in the game, you got to make them fail. They're so annoying. For the Magnate especially.
Yeah, I mean, we can say, you got to make every fate fail, but, now that's, half the fates.
No, but we said Steward and then...
Caretaker.
You also said Admiral.
I think Partisan should be right up there with the Steward.
I don't know if I agree with that.
I think other people having outrage, if you already have the monopoly, is good, because, they have no reason to tax it besides specifically to take the monopoly.
That's true, but then also... Well, first of all, the loyal cards are added. But also...
Magnate can't really seize.
Exactly what I was going to say. The Magnate cannot seize, and then it's hard for them to declare ambitions. So bad for the partisan to be in the game to Magnate.
I think it's definitely not preferred, but I do think it's not like, I don't think it's the same priority level as a steward. I don't think it's really even close. I could see it maybe being like caretaker level of like you can survive with them in the game, you just don't want them in the game. I think steward is going to always be priority number one in terms of like if you're trying to fail someone. Next matchup to talk about though is the Peacekeeper. They really want the weapon monopoly. You're probably going to have to let them have the weapon monopoly. They're going to be dead set on getting it the whole act. Don't even bother unless you can secure it right away and get that point for that objective point for getting it from the supply.
I think that's fine though. Like you don't need all 5 monopolies. No. It's good in Act 3 if maybe somebody else has it to begin with. Like I think that if you can maybe talk and strategize with them about getting them the rock monopoly, if they can help you get another one, great.
Sure. Yeah, it's totally fine that you basically only have 4 options. It just restricts you that much more, which again, like any bit of squeeze is really going to hurt here because of how difficult your objective is to complete.
Right.
But just know that going in that the weapon monopoly is essentially off limits. Don't like really attempt to work towards it. It's just going to be time wasted. You just have to know up front that the Peacekeeper is going to take it from you. And then finally, the Pacifist, they add extra psionic resources to the supply with their witness tokens. They become psionic resources once they're spent by the Pacifist. And then that increases the psionic supply up to 9 and makes the psionic monopoly really valuable for you to have in terms of point scoring because there's going to be on average way more resources on it that count towards empath. I think that's very important to keep in mind.
So if you scrap... I know I'm getting ahead of myself here. If you scrap the monopoly later on, does it lose all 9? Do all 9 disappear if it has all 9 on there?
Yeah.
Okay.
All resources that are on it get taken away.
Okay.
And then for pivots, we're talking about Sea Fates here because we've reached the end of Act 2 unless anyone has any other notable matchups they'd like to call out.
The Planet Breaker, kind of. I mean, they're only going to break like 1, possibly 2 planets in Act 2 specifically, but if they do
but having to outrage 2 things is still not good.
Yeah.
It's still pain in the ass. It's pain in the ass for everyone, but
yeah, it's definitely true. And I think because it's a pain in the ass for everyone, you can like try and get people to collaborate on it. I don't think people are gonna like be like, oh man, we gotta outrage the Magnate's relics. Let's let the Planet Breaker break this relic planet. You know, like I don't think you're like that level of threat that's gonna happen. Whereas like for the Steward, you know. If the Steward's in the game, people might want them to break the psionic planet and get rid of deal makers from the Steward, for example.
Another thing about the Planet Breaker, though, is if you are the Magnate, you're probably like big on calling edicts and stuff. So if it's on escalation and there's a strong empire with lots of purple ships, it's way easier for them to break. So like you kind of help set them up with what you're doing in Act 2.
Sure. But you can always change the policy as well, and then stop putting out the Imperial ships.
But I think the escalation, either escalation or peace is best for you.
I think you can go for peace. Just keep in mind that you also have to pay into the trust as the Magnate, so you're taxing yourself. So you know, ideally you're taxing a type that you don't actually have in your supply right now.
I was gonna say in the early game, war might even be best for the Magnate because it'll generate more favors on average than the other 2 would.
That could be good, and you get a weapon.
Yeah.
Yeah, so really, I don't think any of them are bad. It's like it's kind of situational depending on how it affects you as well as how it affects everyone else. It's a bit of a decision to weigh. Whereas like certain fates like have one policy that they definitely prefer to be out.
Right.
So yeah, Planet Breaker is definitely a good call out. I guess the Pirate too, because they have to raid people for resources and steal resources from them, might be gunning for you because you have a lot of resources.
Oh, you know, I think you were the pirate in the game when I was the Magnate, and I was pretty annoyed. So I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that I guess is another one to look out for. I don't think it's like, you know, the end of the world with the pirates in the game, but definitely just consider that they can raid just your ships.
Yeah.
And they're going to want to come after you because you have a lot of resources. In terms of pivots for Sea Fates, what do you guys think?
I think the Redeemer could be good.
I definitely agree. The Redeemer has to have relics, and they need to win Keeper, I believe, as well, or have no one else win it. So if they have the relic monopoly, that's like really easy to do.
Yeah, and if you're spending your act 2 trying to get a bunch of monopolies, there's a good chance you end up with keeper.
Yeah. The Guardian is another resource-focused one. He cares about the material and fuel. But it's not as simple as the Redeemer because he like has to put them in a certain area that like if he just has them, he can't just put them there. It's like when he gets them. So if you don't have the material and fuel monopoly and then you gain them during Act 3, you can then put them all into the, I believe it's called the Green Vault, and gain progress towards your objective that way.
I think the Judge could be good too, with the monopoly holder having to give their consent in trades, and also with being able to steal resources out of the supply with Merchant League.
Yeah, the Judge, for anyone who's not familiar, has to try and make sure people tie on ambitions. So being in the position to win ambitions is good. This is interesting. The card that lets the Judge give away resources, I don't think it lets you give away resources on the monopolies because they're not
Actually
in your
supply.
resources. It counts as you having them, but I don't think you can give them away with the Arbiter. I'll have to check
do some
about
research.
that. Because that actually could work against you if monopolies are in the game, and then that'll make it really difficult to tie because it's likely that someone will have like a lot of resources of one type, and then you're trying to tie psionic, and they have the psionic monopoly with 4 psionics on it. It might get pretty tricky.
That's true.
But one that doesn't really have a downside for the monopolies is the Gate Wraith, because they have to win ambitions, just straight up win ambitions to progress their objective, and the monopolies are going to be very helpful for that.
Yeah.
I had a game where I pivoted from Act 2 Magnate into Gate Wraith, and I was 4 points away from winning the game on points. Not my C-Fate objective, just straight up points. Like, the monopolies got me that many points. I just kept declaring Tycoon with the material and fuel monopoly. It was very strong.
Did you find it difficult at all? Because like you're very city over starport, like centric fate to like actually move to the gates and then move out of them.
I didn't find it terribly difficult because I think I still had 2 starports. But even if you just had 1, you can prioritize building the starports early on. You don't need to get all the gates out right away.
I think I'd rather have monopolies and few starports than a bunch of starports and no monopolies.
Yeah.
If I'm going extreme.
Like it's not like the easiest thing in the world or what have you, but it's definitely helpful, I would say. Yeah. Gate Wraith in general is just good, so
Yeah.
Very good.
you can go for the Gate Wraith. All right, so that brings us to Act 3 now. We've got our grand ambitions. Oh, I guess we add cards to the court in this. If mining interest or fuel interest are in the court discard pile, add them in the court deck. Okay, so you can recycle your interest cards and secure them again.
And then you get prospectors.
Yep.
I love this guy. This is the first time I've seen his card art because I've never been in a game with
Act 3 Magnate.
2 or 3 Magnate. Man, I love them. They're like,
Cole can put a splash of the prospectors up on the
Yeah,
screen.
I'm going to put the cards
Yeah,
up
please
as we
do,
talk,
please do.
as
That's
we talk
clearly,
about them.
The farmer or whatever.
Does someone want to read the prospectors?
Farmer?
Yeah, you know that picture of the guy and his wife
Oh,
standing
yeah,
inside
yeah,
the
yeah.
It
I
does.
think
The
it is
Gothic.
supposed to be.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Wait, there's like literally a pitchfork in between.
Yeah, that's
That's
why
what
you
I'm saying.
yeah. That's great. Okay,
They're both like
They just
It's
do not look
haunted.
happy.
All right, Prospectors reads, you may build cities on any planets if you don't have the monopoly matching that planet type. You don't need loyal pieces there.
That's fun. It's a protected material guild card. Yeah, that's a neat little ability. We can talk about that more in a minute because I think we also need to talk about the more probably relevant card that they add, which, where did it go? The closed and open economy.
The
Yeah,
last one.
absolutely huge.
Yeah. Oh, I can read
Go
it.
ahead.
So, if the Magnate is a regent, the Reach now operates under a closed economy. While the Magnate is a regent, regents other than the Magnate cannot tax Empire-controlled cities, even loyal ones, unless they have the matching monopoly.
That is crazy.
Yeah, it's very good.
I felt like you
For
were
the
making
Magnate.
fun of me because I'm like, what is that?
No,
oh my
it's
god.
insane.
Yeah, so this is the main reason you want a strong Empire through the first 2 acts, because now you're having these imperial ships that players want to have around to protect their cities are now working against them because they can't use them to tax their own frickin' resources unless they have the monopoly of that type, which they probably don't. If you ever become an outlaw, we will switch to the open economy.
Yeah, if the Empire is weak, this is a pretty good option too.
While the Magnate is an outlaw, players may tax loyal cities more than once per turn. The Magnate may also tax rival and free cities in addition to their loyal cities more than once per turn. I don't think it's nearly as good as closed economy.
No, closed economy's nuts, but open economy, especially if you were able to get that prison wardens earlier, insane.
Yeah, it could be pretty good. I think closed economy is great to use to protect your monopolies from other players, and then you can continue to work towards getting more while they have difficulty gaining any resources at all. It's going to be really difficult for people to take the monopolies back from you, and that's going to be important because of your grand ambitions.
Yes.
For Act 3. You want to do it?
Speaking of, so the first ambition is to have any monopolies, and then the second one is to have at least 2 monopolies.
Yeah.
That's all. After scoring, you must scrap one monopoly you have and all your resources of that monopoly type. You scrap them even if they're not like on the monopoly tile. They can be in protected whatever.
But only if you have them.
Only if you have them.
they
Right.
say.
If another
So-
person has one of the weapons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can get rid of the entirety of one resource type by scrapping a monopoly, which is pretty nuts.
Or you can end up getting rid of only one of them. Like,
Yeah. But like it pretty hard counters certain sea fates. Like, for example, the Redeemer.
Yeah.
They have to scrap the relics. If you just do that in the first chapter, they don't win.
Nope.
Guardians, similarly, material and fuel. You can only affect them half as much by scrapping one, but still do it. Naturalist really wants psionics. If they're in the game, try and scrap the psionic monopoly. So that's very powerful. Of course, it's going to affect your ability to hold more monopolies down the line, but like you're going to have one monopoly to scrap at the start. There's like no way you don't, and so you just have to deal with it, and at the end have the last 2 monopolies in the game, I think, is your goal.
Yeah.
If you do have to play with an open economy, like if you get forced into becoming an outlaw somehow, or if like the Empire is really, really weak and there's barely any ships out anyway, I still might be hesitant to go open economy because it makes it so much easier for your rivals to get monopolies, and there are 3 of them to your 1 or 2 of them. We're not really talking about 2-player campaign if that wasn't obvious. We don't really do that. Some people have said it's good. I don't think we'll ever do it. We play 4. I've played a few with 3.
I do think that open economy is really you're only going to get the full advantage of it if you do have prison wardens from earlier.
That makes sense. So that's that. And then we can talk about the prospectors now. Like we said, unless you build cities on any planets, if you don't have the monopoly matching that planet, even without loyal pieces, this is going to be great for gaining new monopolies because you're able to tax new resource types. And also, you can put them out, right before scoring, gain some bonus city power to supplement any ambitions that you're winning with your existing monopolies. That'll be very strong.
Yep.
These cities are going to be particularly vulnerable to raiding because there's like nothing else there. So try to build them in imperial controlled systems if you can. And if you can't, try and build them in a double slot system so you can at least build a starport and then start getting some ships out to protect it. That's prospectors.
Prospectors is another one of the things that benefits from having the strong empire that we've said the Magnate has wanted this whole time. But I still would be hesitant to put out too many of them because you can get raided unless you have all of your resources locked up on the Monopoly and not on your player board where they can't get raided. So if you're in a good spot, especially at the beginning with a couple of monopolies where you have them on the Monopoly but you don't have them on the player board, that's the time when you can go out and try to get more with the prospector cities.
Mm-hmm. And then as far as the general strategy for this act, I mean, if you made it through Act 2, you're probably in a pretty good spot for Act 3. I think it's just more of the same. Hold the monopolies, which becomes easier with the closed economy.
I would add, though, that because you'll probably have a couple monopolies at the beginning, at the end, it's very likely there will only be 2, maybe 3 monopolies in the game for you to potentially have for your grand ambition.
Yep.
That scoring just regular points will be really important throughout the whole act.
Yep.
And back in Act 2 as well, if you want to aim for the win, even though they get halved. Which the monopolies put you in a good spot for, and the prospect of being able to get that bonus city power on a dime is really huge for too.
Yeah. So I think in terms of prioritizing which monopolies to scrap, I think that's important to talk about. The ones that you can win easiest, keep them. Unless they're like a hard counter to something like the Redeemer, you can get rid of that at your earliest convenience.
I think Rocket should go first in most situations.
So people can't battle you?
So people can't battle you. And also because there are other ways to win that ambition specifically.
Sure. Yeah, I think that makes sense because you probably don't have many starports anyway, and so any weapon guild cards you gain at this point are probably better used on getting more ships to defend your cities with.
Yeah.
Discarding them in prelude for more ships. You're probably not going to try and win Warlord anyway. Weapon is definitely a good call to go first, I would say. And then beyond that, I would probably material or fuel because you can still win Tycoon with one of the monopolies.
Right.
And then after that, it's kind of just like Calvin Ball, do whatever you want.
After that, I would not do the other material or fuel, whichever one you did, because your 2 protected guild cards are material and fuel. So holding on to that monopoly will really cement your...
I guess maybe you don't need to discard one if you decide you're really not going to try to score Empath or Keeper, one or the other. You can go for that one first and really just lock down on Tycoon.
If somebody else is definitely locking down one of those two, then I think that's the safe.
Yeah, because then that can also harm them because they get fewer of the resources.
Right. Especially if you're poised to lose that monopoly anyway, then that would be a good one to toss.
Yeah. Yeah, monopolies with fewer resources that you... fewer resources that you have of that type. Get them gone. Gonna hurt you less as well because you probably won't have to discard any resources from your own player board.
Additionally, this is kind of in the weeds, I guess, but if there are more non-monopoly resources in the game, a player seeking to gain resources may gain a non-monopoly resource instead of a resource that works towards monopoly.
No, that makes sense. Okay, so notable cards. We recorded this video sooner than I thought we were going to. I did not have time to go through and look at all the notable cards for Act 3. That being said, I feel like you can follow the template of anything that gets you resources is good, anything that lets you declare ambitions is good.
And Prison Wardens is good.
There are so many cards by Act 3 that are going to be added to the court by unique cards from different fates that it's really time consuming to pour through them all. I think that's a pretty good playbook to follow.
If you've watched this far, you're proficient enough with the Magnate to decide for yourself which cards are good.
Very true. And then you can leave those in the comments.
Yes.
And then what else do we have? Matchups and pivots. Matchups, we talked about the C fates that you're good into. That's also a thing you can kind of advocate for in terms of players being hesitant to let you succeed in Act 2 because of the monopolies. You're hey, obviously you and me, we don't want these C fates. We're doing pretty well for ourselves. If players draw the Redeemer, the Guardian, or to a lesser extent the Naturalist, I completely counter them, and so C fates are going to be disincentivized if you allow me to stay in, which is going to be good for both of us.
Yeah, because the Magnate scoring potential of those monopolies is really high, even if you may not get your Chapter 4, Act 3, 20 points from having both remaining monopolies.
Yeah.
Your ambition scoring until then is going to be really powerful.
Yep. And then additionally, Act 3 matchups to look out for. Admiral, I would say, is one. They're going to prevent you from using the Imperial ships for anything if you're a regent, which is definitely bad. It still allows you to tax, though, right? You just can't move them and battle with them.
Wait, I'm sorry. I got distracted thinking about something else. Can you repeat that, please?
The Admiral's Martial Law, it prevents you from moving and using them for any actions, the Imperial ships. Can you tax Imperial-controlled systems?
If closed economy is active, regions other than the Magnate cannot tax Empire-controlled cities.
Right, but I'm saying if the Admiral adds martial law, can the Magnate tax his own cities? Regions except the admiral follow these rules if they do not have imperial officers or rogue admirals. You cannot command the imperial fleet. On your turn, you don't control empire-controlled systems and can't take actions with imperial ships. So that means that an empire-controlled... Oh, no, you can still tax your loyal cities. You can tax loyal cities. You can't tax your other cities that you may like.
Yeah, but the admiral then can't tax empire-controlled stuff anyway. So I feel like the admiral actually in Act 3 is not as bad as I worried it might be.
Yeah, as long as you can go close to economy.
Yeah, open economy...
I do still think it's important to note, though, because you're going to want to do other things besides just taxing resources. Only one of your 4 suits lets you tax resources to begin with. You're going to want to do other things, and the Admiral really restricts that if we have a strong empire, which we do want.
Right.
So, be on the lookout for them. Steward, obviously, if they're still in the game, you don't like them. But if you made it through Act 2 with Steward, good job. You made it through the hardest part. You can probably continue to weather the storm.
Yeah, you're an expert arcs player. Nothing can stop you.
Founder, again, still good. Keep that Commonwealth strong and use it to protect yourself as long as possible. Be on the lookout for opportunities to break rank, because if you win the Commonwealth ambition, like if they declare Tycoon as the Commonwealth ambition, and you get double points from that, that might be a time to break rank. You can roll a single raid die against a free city. You don't even have to deal a hit to it. That's enough to break out, and you might get a resource from it in exchange. Just battling in general constitutes harming for that. The Advocate makes your guild cards cost double, but other than that, or count for double, but other than that, they don't particularly affect you.
I think I don't want them in the game then, because I want the monopolies I hold to be valuable, and having guild cards worth double devalues the monopolies by having guild cards worth more.
But I think there are a lot of other fates that you're going to prioritize trying to fail in Act 2.
Yes.
And also, you don't really have the energy to try and fail anyone.
I wouldn't help them.
Yeah, no, sure. If the Advocate's in the game, it's not going to be ideal for you, but there's not much you can do about it at this point. The Caretaker, they can scrap your guild cards, so look out for that, I guess, but not particularly notable for the Magnate.
But everyone hates the Caretaker.
Yeah. Partisan can force outrage of your resource types. They can make it so you can't spend a certain type of resource anymore, which can be a pretty big deal. But again, not really much you can do about that except try to convince them to do it to someone else.
I don't think it's as important in Act 3, though, as it was in Act 2. I think Partisan Act 2 is worse than...
Sure. Partisan seizing is still in play at this point, and so... Right.
But at this point, you have monopolies, you're getting rid of them. You're not desperately trying to claw your way into getting monopolies.
Sure. Another one that is going to affect you, but you can't really do anything about it if they made it this far, is the Believer. They can, scrap a lot of the cards that let you tax at some point, and also flip the doctrine to the side that only lets you play the cards that don't let you tax. And so it can greatly reduce your ability to tax.
When I saw her face,
I'm a believer.
Yes, that. And then in terms of the other C fates, I think that's probably it for notable matchups, honestly. The Pirate Act 3 isn't really changing much about how you're going to play. No, nor is the Pacifist Act 3, or I don't think the Peacekeeper Act 3, but none of us have played with the Peacekeeper Act 3.
Ricky?
It might be.
I hope it's him.
Yeah. So I think that's the end of the actual strategy discussion for the Magnate. Closing thoughts, I guess. How do you guys like the Magnate overall?
I like the Magnate. I was frustrated in the first game that I played with the Magnate, but the more games that I play and the more fates I find out I also don't like, the more I like the Magnate.
Yeah, I don't really have the problem of finding more fates I don't like. I think most of them are pretty cool. But I shared the same sentiment of the first time the Magnate was in the game. I was like, this guy sucks. He doesn't let me do anything. He's not fun. And I don't really think I would want to play him. It doesn't really seem that interesting. Once I played him myself and played the Act 2, I found it, a lot more engaging and interesting. I didn't really understand all the axes on which you could attempt to gain resources and play the economy game when we were first starting. And I think now that that's more apparent to me, I like them a lot more.
I have only played with Act 1 Magnate. I have not seen Act 2 or 3. He's cool. I was scared to do Act 2 Magnate. I totally succeeded in my objective when I was playing him. But I was like, this Act 2 is crazy. It's like, it's daunting looking at it.
Amy, look what I got you.
Oh,
Can you do these?
do what?
Because you're like a master baker, you know?
Do you want me to make them for you? Is that what you're saying?
Heck yeah, dude.
Look what I got for you.
I mean,
Stuff you
This
can
is
make
easier,
for me.
you know?
Yeah, but mine are better.
I mean,
One day I'll make the real stuff.
all right.
We'll take those too, though.
Yeah, I can make them
Oh,
anytime you want
because
them.
I've been craving some cookies, you know?
Okay.
I didn't know that you were at like the elite level of baking and you could just whip some stuff up together.
Well, it
you know?
takes a while, but they're way better.
They're way better, yeah. I mean,
Yes.
Betty Crocker's, you can't sleep on the
Betty
Betty
Crocker's
Crocker.
great.
Man.
Yeah, Betty.
They're
it doesn't-
still better than Betty.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm just saying, don't sleep on Betty, you know?
Yeah.
All right. Just, I should.
What time is it? Just curious.
It's like 1,300 hours.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So just make sure, Perry, make sure that you know.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dio.
If you have to leave, Christian, you can just give your closing thoughts and we can wrap this up.
Yeah. I have not played the Magnate. I actually think I would like playing them because they're very like control-y kind of play style where like you want to get the resources and stop people from doing anything.
True.
He's a blue-white deck guy.
Yeah.
He also really likes to tax Jamie.
I also
So-
really enjoy taxing
I-
Jamie, so it's perfect, you know. Taxing Jamie gets your resources.
That's true.
I was thinking about that while we were talking about something maybe for Act 2. I was like, oh my god, that game. I had flashbacks. I couldn't.
I hate playing against them because it seems like it's really easy for them to just like win Tycoon if they have, you know, both the monopolies.
Yes, it is.
And I've always had a hard time getting the monopolies from them.
Yeah,
So.
that's true. Overall, how, I guess, strong do we think the Magnate is? Not that it really matters that much.
I would say before Act 2, I would say pivoting away from Magnate in Act 1, great, because of Merchant League.
Sure.
Doing the Magnate in Act 2, not strong, very hard to do, but if you get through it, I think it might be one of the strongest A-Fates in Act 3.
I think that's true. I think the payoff is great. The risk is high because if you fail at Act 2, you're switching to a C Fate.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of up shit creek without a paddle because most of them aren't going to be very synergistic with what you've been trying to accomplish up to this point. If you can draw into, you know, Gate Wraith, Redeemer, or to a lesser extent the Guardian, I think, that's going to be helpful. But like that's not even half of all the C Fates. And obviously a C Fate isn't like always, you know, incredible. They're definitely good, but they're by no means a guaranteed win or even close
Right.
to it. So
if you see it pop up for your option in Act 1, great choice. That decision at the end of Act 1 about sticking with it
Yeah.
or pivoting is going to be important. I
yeah,
think.
you need to really weigh how likely it is that you'll get those monopolies in the first chapter. If you're not going to be able to get those monopolies in the first chapter, or it's going to be very difficult to do so, probably just pivot and take your Merchant League.
Yeah.
The decision going in from Act 1 to Act 2 is pivotal, is what I would say.
Yes.
Very true.
Many people are saying.
It's
Yeah.
true.
So that's Magnate, and that's the first one of these we've recorded. Very fun. Oh, I didn't read their goals, like their like flavor text for them. Oh well, maybe we
I
can do it
just
next
put
time.
it in the beginning.
Yeah, and in Act 1, they have to barter for resources and favors from rivals during summits. In Act 2, they have to take and hold monopolies over the resource supplies. And in Act 3, they have to hold monopolies and escape from the reach with their riches.
Magnate. Corner the market and dominate the reach with your commercial prowess.
Not the best flavor text out there. There's some better ones.
I love his art though. He's like
Yeah, he's
one
a
of my
funny
favorite A-Fate art.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you for watching this ARCS discussion. I think we had a lot more to say than we expected to.
Yeah.
Cheers.
There was no water in this when I took that sip.
Water in this one.